Welcome to our Rough and Ready videos in Job. This is Job 35, and it's quite a short chapter, but quite a punchy chapter, as Elihu addresses Job, addresses some of Job's thinking. Remember, Elihu basically is very different to the other friends of Job, who were saying, "Look, you're suffering because you've sinned," and Elihu's saying, "No, I don't agree with that. But Job, because you suffered, you have sinned," and he's dealing with Job's sins in his suffering. So while Job is right in many ways, and fundamentally God is going to say he's right, just because he's right doesn't mean he can't be wrong, if that makes sense. And there are some areas in which he's wrong, and Elihu is beginning to address those. And here he's addressing Job's point, and he says it in verse 2 to 4. What's the point in being good, in essence? What advantage have I? How am I better off than if I had sinned? And that takes us back to chapter 9, verse 22. Remember, he'd accused God of just taking away the righteous and the unrighteous in his judgment. So it doesn't seem to matter whether you are righteous or unrighteous. God is wiping both away. In chapter 10, verse 3, he talks about does God take delight in the wicked, and in chapter 21, he has talked about how the wicked, are so often happy, and then how the wicked very rarely are punished. So the logical conclusion of that is, well, look, how am I better off than if I had sinned? Doesn't seem to be making any difference. And so that's actually Job slipping into the thinking of the comforters, slipping into if I'm righteous, if I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to get the right result. That very thing that Satan was saying, look, that's why people follow you, God, because you give them good things. If you take it away, Job won't worship you. And so Elihu's concerned for Job because he sees that he's there are aspects of his thinking which are slipping back into that. Look, if you're good, Father Christmas will come and give you lots of presents, but if you're bad, you'll be on his naughty list. Or the cry of the sufferer. What have I done? What have I done to deserve this? And that's been some part of Job's thinking. So what does he say? Well, he says two things, and they're quite hard things to hear, really. As I say, it's a sort of punchy chapter. In verse 5 to verse 8, he gets Job to look up at the heavens. Now, if you look up at the heavens today in Tipton, the cloud's quite low and quite grey. So I don't think that's quite what he has in mind. But if you can remember back to Sunday when it was gloriously sunny and there was some clouds really, really high up. And I remember looking up with Simeon, and he was telling me what they were called. But they were almost like seeing the stars at the night sky. They made you feel small, made you realise, wow, how high the heavens are and how low we are. That's what Elihu's saying. Look up at the heavens and see, and behold the clouds which are higher than you. And then verse 6 to 8, he's saying, look, God doesn't need us. God's happiness isn't dependent on you or on me. God isn't so grateful for us because we've been really good and righteous, and that's just made his day a whole lot easier, and so he's more inclined to bless us. Or just quite frankly, we've been annoying God and doing the wrong things, caused him a lot of a headache, and now he's not going to bless us. God isn't like us. Our sin affects each other, verse 8, our wickedness, our righteousness, in a very direct way, but God isn't like us. He's higher than us. So to say, look, what's the point in being good? Well, it's kind of the wrong question to be asking, and it's wrong because God is so different to us. He's not affected by us in the way that maybe Job is saying. Should the great and transcendent God, be affected by a mere mortal? No. In verse 9 to 16, he's saying, well, if we're crying out in that kind of way, we're asking with the wrong motives, with the wrong spirit. It's the wrong way to go about seeking God. And I think here verse 13 is key. Surely God does not hear an empty cry. So he talks in verse 9 about because of the multitude of oppressions, people cry out. They call for help. So there are people crying out all over the place because of their suffering. But here Elihu's saying, in so many cases, it's in the wrong spirit. It's actually in our pride. Verse 12, because of the pride of evil men. It's not the humble cry, though yes, there are humble cries that God loves to hear, but very often those cries are not humble. They're angry, they're proud, they're self-righteous, whatever. They don't come from faith. They come from unbelief, and they're self-centered rather than God-centered. And that's what he's saying that Job is doing. And he says, verse 15, and now because his anger, God's anger, does not punish, and God does not take much note of transgression, Job opens his mouth in empty talk. He multiplies words without knowledge. So Job cries out to God for how he sees the way the world is empty talk. Now, that might sound really hard, but the reason we should take Elihu seriously is because in chapter 38, verse 2, God will say, the Lord will answer Job out of the whirlwind and say, who is this that darkens my counsel by words without knowledge? He uses the same language as Elihu, words without knowledge. So in a strange way, Job is slipping into that sort of prosperity gospel, that kind of therapy gospel. You will be better, you will feel better if you do good. And then when that sort of becomes challenged, we're not feeling better, things aren't going better, though we feel we're doing right, then the complaints come and God is appealed to. And Elihu's saying, no. God is bigger than that. He's transcendent. And you're asking him the wrong ways, in the wrong spirit. Why should God answer you? So it's a punchy answer. It's a hard answer. It's a humbling answer to Job, to tackle his sin that's come out of his suffering. Not as that's the cause of his suffering, but that is the result of his suffering. So it's Elihu's shortest speech, and we'll come tomorrow to his last one, to his fourth one.